welcome to the Strong Men podcast. So many of us men have got it wrong. In our attempts to be strong, we end up fragile, fake and weak. Our current understanding of what it means to be a strong man is warped. This misunderstanding almost led to my suicide, and it continues to contribute towards the high suicide rate seen in men. That's why the Strong Men podcast is on a mission to redefine the strong man, to help men grasp true strength and work towards it. Not just to keep them on the planet a little longer, but to help them thrive. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Strong Men podcast. Apologies for the very short hiatus. Things have just gotten very hectic all of a sudden, and part of the reason for that is that I'm actually getting married in just over 3 weeks time, which is exciting. A bit crazy, but yeah, looking forward to it nonetheless. And with that in mind, my plan was always to run this first series of the Strong Men podcast and then take a bit of a break. So yeah, we've got a few more episodes coming before that. I might have to push a couple of them and release them after the wedding, but we shall see. But we've got another one coming to you today, and today I'm lucky enough to be chatting with Pher Nicolson, who is very well known to me. We're good friends, having grown up in this small neighbourhood of Castletown up in Caithness. What you'll probably notice in this conversation is that my accent is probably potentially a little bit thicker than it normally is. I would say I've got like a sort of professional voice. This is the one that you're hearing at the moment. And I've got my Caithness accent too, which is what I normally speak like when I'm not doing things like podcasts or stuff for the business. But what happens whenever I'm hanging out with another Caithnesian, that accent kind of comes back. It gets a lot thicker, and you'll probably notice that in today's interview. The thing that stuck out to me most when I was listening back to it was how I say the word charity. In Caithness, that, you know, charity, car, garage, gary, marry. I'm getting married. That would be the way you would say it normally. You know, if I'm doing my professional voice, in fact, if you listen back, I probably said I'm getting married. It's not how I'd normally say it. I'm getting married in a few weeks is how I'd normally say it. So it was something that stood out to me. So I was like, if it stands out to me, then it's probably going to stand out to you. So yeah, just thought I'd make you aware of that. But yeah, we had a really good conversation. We're chatting a little bit about Caithness and growing up in that sort of environment. And we talk a lot about sport, in particular football. And that will make sense when you begin to understand Pher's work. We talk about Caithness footy and, you know, why actually we both miss it a lot. There's something that's very special about it, and I was trying to remember whilst we were chatting if me and Pher actually ever played in the same team in Caithness. We certainly did down in Edinburgh for a number of years, but I was trying to remember if we both played at Castletown at the same time. I think we might have when I was very, very young, but then I moved on and played for a different team instead. I know, I'm a bit of a traitor. Didn't play for my local team. Shocking, I know. But anyway, so yeah, we spend a little time, as I say, reflecting on that. But then we talk more about his job. He is a project manager for the Changing Room, which is an initiative that uses the power of football to help men with their mental health. Now, as I say, I know Pher pretty well, and I've obviously had a lot of time with him, chatting to him and that sort of thing, but even still in this conversation he was able to introduce some new ideas and bring me to some new understandings. What stood out most was just the way that he was able to draw the comparisons between football and mental health. It was really quite something. So yeah, I'm sure you're really going to enjoy this interview with Pher. I'm not going to do any more chat because you're probably bored of me by now, so let's get into it. Today on the Strong Men podcast, I'm lucky enough to welcome my former next door neighbour, Pher Nicolson. Pher, say hi to everyone, and can you just give everyone a little bit of an introduction?
Yeah, hi everybody. Good to be with you. I'm Pher Nicolson, originally from the far north of Scotland in Caithness, specifically Castletown, and I've been down in Edinburgh kind of on and off since about 2008, working now for SAMH. Married to Siobhan, and very settled down here, so all good.
Nice, yes, aye. So we both grew up in that little village of Castletown, which nobody's ever heard of. But people drive through Castletown now because of the North Coast 500, because it's on that was on that route. But yeah, what was it like for you growing up? You know, knowing next door that across the road you had me living there. You know.
Well, when I grew up, I didn't think about that very much, that you were always there. But I guess with hindsight, that was the case. I think Castletown actually was a great place to grow up. I really loved the place. I still do. I try and get up north kind of as much as I can. And I think it's one of those places that you just take it for granted a wee bit when you grew up there. You got so much space. You're generally freedom to do kind of whatever you want. We kind of both lived just across from the football pitch, so like you could go out any time of day, play football, all that sort of stuff, and you kind of felt protected in a place like that. You knew people, you were known. It was just a great place to be, and there's always that part of me, I think, that probably wants to be back up there, but life doesn't always work that way. That you get to just choose what's convenient for you. So. But I love the North. I'm a big advocate of Caithness and especially Castleton.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I've said before is like, I don't mind living in like the busy cities like Edinburgh, Glasgow, but after a while of being in the city, I feel like this need to get out, to go like to the countryside, specifically Caithness if I can, because obviously that's home. And I do think it obviously ties into mental health side of things. It's like, we tend to thrive when we're out and about in nature. So when like growing up, as you say, we're outside a lot of the time doing football or different sports, or obviously there's beaches and forest walks and all sorts. So and I suppose there's less to do, if that makes sense, in terms of like there's one cinema and that cinema wasn't always there. McDonald's, the closest McDonald's is 2 hours away. So you kind of have, you have to find other activities to keep yourself busy. But that was really good as well in a way. And yeah, I totally agree. I miss that.
Yeah, no, you're right. And like, it's funny because you mentioned things like the cinema and stuff. Like, I live just outside of the city now. There's so many cinemas and stuff that I could go to. I couldn't tell you the last time I went to one. You just kind of you did what you were used to back home, and also like I think there's a great sporting community up there, and I've never found that maybe anywhere else that I've been. Like, played loads of football growing up, badminton as well. Like there was loads of just community sports, and there was a sense of belonging within that, and I've kind of always missed that about Caithness, and not having that is, it's hard to replicate elsewhere for me, because that's where I grew up, and there's that old saying of you bloom where you're planted, and I think there's definitely a bit of that, but you can bloom elsewhere too without getting too flowery.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. Like the one thing I miss most, I would say, about Caithness is probably the football leagues, because both of us played quite often, and it's a summer league. It's not like down south, down in the central belt, where it tends to be like it runs in line with the normal football calendar throughout the year. Like we have the summer football season. It starts sort of April and finishes maybe August time. I'd imagine, I'm not sure, but I imagine that's just because the weather is so bad over the winter that it's not really viable to play all year round. But yeah, you're right. There was something special about those leagues and the cup competitions as well, like Highland Amateur and that sort of thing. That you're right. I've never felt the same kind of enjoyment in football, or it's maybe not even it's not even enjoyment. It's just there's something that feels a bit special about it. And you might be right. Coming from growing up there, it probably feels a little bit more special than it would. But yeah, there is something about it that is different.
No, definitely. There's a sense of belonging if you're playing with your local team or playing with the pals that you grew up with in school. All that sort of stuff. It kind of means a bit more to you, I think. So when I came down here and I played in different teams, it didn't mean the same to me, and so my motivation maybe was never as high as it was when I was back home. But yeah, that's how it goes.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, Pher, thanks very much for coming on to the podcast. You mentioned in your introduction that you work for SAMH. Some listeners might have heard of SAMH before. Do you want to give a little brief introduction to them and what you do basically as a charity?
Yeah, so SAMH is the Scottish Association for Mental Health. We're at the forefront of a lot of mental health work in Scotland. We're involved in a whole range of different things. So you've got community services, national programs. We've got kind of sister charities like See Me and Respect Me that focus on stigma and bullying. Um, we're 100 years old this year as an organisation, which surprises a lot of people because we maybe tend to think of mental health as quite a new thing or something we're only just starting to talk about more and more. But one of the points I've made this year is that we've had mental health as long as we've had a brain between our ears, and that's not changed just because it was 100 years ago. But I think the fact is now we're talking about it a bit more. So at SAMH, we're excited about looking back over the past 100 years and how our work has developed, but actually looking ahead to the next 100 and all the kind of possibilities and advancements that there could be going forward. So great organisation to work with. I've been there about 5 years now, and 5.5 years, and really enjoyed it. Doing great work, really part of a good team, well supported, and really valued within the organisation. So I can't speak highly enough of SAMH, and they continue to do really important work. One of the recent things that we did was the Ask Them About Suicide campaign. A lot of people might have seen the adverts on the telly, and that had a really kind of powerful impact. And I think, there will be more of that sort of stuff in the future, I would hope. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, they absolutely, and you guys just, yeah, you're part of it, doing amazing work. I've been lucky enough to, in my own work, I got in touch with SAMH, and they were more than happy to help send over resources and things that I've actually implemented with a number of my own clients. So yeah, I'm indebted to SAMH too, for their work. They've been super helpful. I saw it on their Instagram fairly recently, the fact that it's 100 years old, and that it did actually take me by surprise, because often I kind of think about, mental health support and charity being charities like SAMH being a more recent thing, because, that my impression of it is like mental health wasn't really something that was talked about or understood particularly well a few generations ago, and it's perhaps only just coming to the fore now. But clearly that's totally mistaken. I'm totally mistaken in that they have been around for far longer than I actually realised.
Yeah, I mean, that's a common misunderstanding that people have. When I've been doing sessions out and about at different football clubs lately, and one of the questions I've been asking is, how old do you think SAMH are? And people generally would say, maybe 10, 20, 30 years or so. And actually now they're quite taken aback when they think we've been on the go for over 100 years. And, that's older than the NHS. And it's quite significant when you think of it in those terms. And it was started by a young woman in Paisley, Dr. Kate Fraser, I believe her name was, 100 years ago. For a woman to start a mental health organisation back then, that's really pioneering stuff. And so I think we want to kind of capture that essence this year. And as we look ahead, let's continue to try and be pioneering when it comes to mental health work, and to move forward in a way that's kind of innovative and progressive, but ultimately for the good of the mental health of Scotland. That's what we're all about. So.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to come back to, we've chatted about football a little bit, and that does tie into your role, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But first, I'm interested to know, how did you actually end up working in mental health?
Yeah, so it wasn't like I'd ever kind of figured out a career path that I was going to take, and I certainly never thought I would have been working in mental health. But I'd been involved in various kind of third sector organisations in Edinburgh. Was kind of looking for work that was meaningful to me, and was kind of, I suppose, 33 now. I was about late 20s, 27, 28. I was looking for new work, and I saw this opportunity with SAMH, and it was for a new role called the changing room. They were looking for a project manager, and I was thinking, well, I'm probably not qualified for that. I don't have experience in mental health. I hadn't had any management experience at that time. But what I did have was like a real passion for football. And I'd actually always had a bit of an interest in mental health. At that time, I'd never connected myself with it in a way. I didn't have much understanding of it. But I was quite interested in it. And actually, it was interesting because my granddad, who's in Dundee, he actually had a career in mental health. I didn't realise that until I ended up getting into this job. That's another story. So anyway, I applied for this job with SAMH. I remember as part of the process, applying for that, there was the opportunity to call who's now my manager, Robert, and have a conversation about the role. So I had that phone call, and actually I started to think, oh, this could be something that fits for me, because the job was about using the power of football to support men with their mental health and well-being. And the one thing that I had on my side was a passion for football, a real kind of desire and understanding about how that was relevant to people's lives, and especially within Scotland, like football's an absolutely massive thing. You can't really avoid it wherever you go. So, and that was everything to me. That was my comfort zone, was football. So I ended up applying and was fortunate enough to get the job. And yeah, ever since then, getting into the job has been a pretty big learning curve. I had to learn a lot, and I mentioned before, though, I was really well supported by the team at SAMH, and I guess my mental health journey kind of started to make sense once I got into this job, and I was able to kind of piece things together and learn as we go. So yeah, it was never a kind of plan of mine, but this idea of linking football and mental health, I thought they could come together really nicely, and it seemed to do that for me, for sure.
Yeah, it is such a great idea. I think when you were talking about how football's such a huge thing in Scotland, I was seeing a stat the other day, which I think, if I'm getting it right, was like out of all the leagues in Europe, per capita, Scottish football is the most highly supported or something like that. Which, yeah, it really indicates just how much influence football has in this country. And yeah, the whole concept of tying football in with mental health is brilliant, because I think for men, generally speaking, like chatting about your mental health or any conversation that talks about mental health can be a little off-putting. But if you put it into the context of like football, then all of a sudden it perhaps comes a little bit more accessible to guys, which I think is just, yeah, really, really awesome. So am I right in thinking like you were in charge of this new initiative? Was the change room a brand new thing and you were to kind of lead it?
Yeah, in a sense, it was a new project at the time that we'd been given funding for, and when I came in, it was about developing that, and I worked closely with other people in SAMH to do that, absolutely. But it was about developing a project that was going to connect men in their middle years, so that's like roughly the ages of 30 to 64, to get support for their mental health. And so we got funding from Movember, the men's health charity that grow moustaches every year. They're huge, and they fund a lot of different projects across the world, and the Change Room was one of them. So SAMH kind of had this idea for the Change Room project that would use football as the tool to engage men with their mental health. And we partnered with the SPFL Trust, and also at the time it was Hibernian Football Club that we launched with initially. So don't worry, we went to Hearts not long after. So
yay!
Yeah, but that was the kind of concept. And then from kind of late 2017 to early 2018, we were planning and developing this idea for how the project was going to look. And it's important to say it was a pilot project to begin with. So we were just testing out what we thought could have an impact. And so within that, we kind of devised a 12-week course for guys to come into the stadium and engage and connect with other guys, but also talk about mental health. So we're providing opportunities for them in that. And, we talked about it just briefly there, the kind of power of football and what it has. I think for me, one of the things I've realised over the years is that for men in Scotland, the football stadium is one of the few places that they go into on a week-to-week basis and they'll let out emotion, right? So whether that's like joy or frustration or anger, like shouting at the ref, shouting at the players, scoring a goal, like how often do you see guys, grown men, hugging and kissing each other? Like you don't get that, but football can do that, right? So football is the place where guys let out their emotion, whatever they're feeling, like it's a release for them. And for me, then it makes sense. Like a project like the Changing Room can harness that space, that environment where guys are already comfortable, where they've probably had a lifelong connection. So if you're a Hibs fan or a Hearts fan, like you go to Tynecastle or Easter Road and you kind of feel at home there. So that's the space where you can be a bit more open and you can have these conversations. So for us, the actual environment, the football stadiums where we are delivering these courses, it became an active player. It became a key part in terms of how we're going to get guys to get to a place that they feel they can talk about more openly and not have that sense of judgment. So that for me is the power of football, and that's what it can do. And I think we've seen that over the years with the project from its early stages to where we are now. So
Yeah, that's brilliant. I hadn't actually really reflected on that. That idea that for some men, like that is literally it in terms of expressing a lot of these emotions one time a week. But yeah, it's funny when you say that as well. There's like one or two people I think of who do tend to be quite reserved and quite closed off. But then as soon as you get them at the football, they transform into a totally different person. So yeah, it's so true. It is. That's a really
yeah,
good point.
and I think we see it as well, like in like actually playing football. So the change room project that I manage isn't about guys playing football. It's more like coming into the football environment and having these conversations. But if you think back to, when you or me were playing football more regularly, you cross that line onto the pitch and you let out a whole lot of your personality, whether if it's the way you play or just like throwing yourself into tackles or whatever. I was never very good at that, to be honest, but I like to float
Twinkle
around.
toes. You were too busy skinning everybody. So
didn't last like that for long, unfortunately. But anyway, that was the thing. So football's got the ability to do that. It brings out certain things within you, and it can be a healthy release. A lot of the time, it can be an unhealthy release. But we're trying to capture that idea that you can use football to open up and talk. So.
yeah, Again, that's a really good point. Like for me, when it was playing football, I did almost feel like it became almost like another person. Like I would channel my aggression like in a positive way because it would help me kind of go into that tackle a bit harder and win the ball, or determined to run track back and win the ball off the player again. Or if someone kind of leaves the boot in a little bit on you, then I'm going to give it back a little bit the next time as well. So you're totally right. It does allow you to channel it. Sometimes maybe not in such a healthy way, but yeah, generally speaking, it is definitely a healthy release. I think people get to see a different side of you when you play football, or certainly in my case. I don't know about you.
No, definitely.
So, you talked about the change room and saying how it's not actually about playing football. So, I was wondering if you could give us a bit of insight into what you would actually do with the group of guys that you're working with.
The program's a 12-week course, and essentially what we're doing is we're trying to journey guys from a space of maybe struggling with their mental health or not talking about it or whatever, to a place where they feel they can talk, that they increase a sense of confidence and purpose and all that sort of thing. So we do that in quite an informal way. We like the kind of sessions to be relaxed, and ultimately it's about the peers. The guys in the room are what makes the course work. But we start relaxed. We have things like a quiz or a stadium tour, a motivational speaker, or like a guest speaker from the club, and these are things that are going to hopefully attract guys to consider taking part in this course, because we know that getting people in the door is actually a challenge, because it takes a lot of courage to be able to say, I'm actually struggling, I need to do something about my mental health here. But if I go to this course, what are people going to think of me? What am I going to think of me if I'm saying that I need to do something to? Because most people don't necessarily think of going to a program to manage their health necessarily. So we have to try and make it appealing. People have to want to come in. So part of that appeal is the access to get into different parts of the stadium. We do a session that's a walk and talk. So you're going around the pitch. You're as close to as on the pitch as you can get, and you're in that kind of environment that's meaningful to you. We do things like walking football, which just a bit of a laugh, to be honest. That's the one session where you're kind of doing some more heavy physical activity, if you want to call it that. We have kind of mental health awareness sessions. We do a session that looks solely at stigma. We kind of talk about experiences with mental health, kind of discussion-based sessions. But what we're kind of gearing the guys towards is a bit of a self-care plan, in the sense of we have a session later in the course which is all about, building a team for your well-being. How are you going to manage your well-being, and putting down that on paper like you would write down a football team. And that's something the guys can take away with them. So the guys are all coming to the course with different experiences, different kind of backgrounds. They might actually not necessarily be struggling with their mental health. They might want to learn more about it. And that's kind of the point. It can be for anyone. It doesn't need to be for someone that's struggling. Although invariably people join because they're wanting to get a bit of support. So yeah, different experiences inform what each individual will take away from the course. But the impact of it is that actually you're connecting a bunch of guys in a way that they're talking about mental health. So the football aspect might make it accessible for them or acceptable to come, but generally it's the mental health aspect that's having the impact. The fact that they're getting that space to talk, they're being listened to, they're being heard, they're being related to. All these things have an impact. So that's a very kind of brief nutshell of the program, but it's just trying to increase social connections and help guys manage their mental health in a way that's helpful going forward, because we recognise that 12 weeks is only a short period in someone's life, and actually after that, it's about how you manage your mental health going forward.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's just putting, like you say, that plan in place for them to then go away and not only you kind of look after themselves, but hopefully have people who are supporting them and in their corner type thing, so to back them up and be there for them. So yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. And I'm really, it's awesome to hear that there's stuff like that for guys. And that there's funding getting put towards schemes and stuff like that can really, really help men and support them. My next question then, I guess, would be like, through your work, what would you say has been your biggest lesson about mental health?
Yeah, I mean, difficult to say exactly what the biggest lesson would be. I was thinking about this, and there's a number of things that you could say, and I suppose it's what I've learned is that it's helped me learn about myself and probably my own experience with mental health. And I came into this job with very little understanding about mental health and no kind of personal connection to it. Now, I would say I'm quite fortunate in that I've probably never received a diagnosis of a mental health problem. I've never been at that level where I would say I've had depression or anxiety, but I can definitely look back now and think, hang on, there was times in my life where my mental well-being was really low, and I was probably on a bit of a road at certain times, and that was quite a powerful thing to kind of grasp, to look back on my own experience and then think, we all have mental health, and just because it's not been really bad for me, it doesn't mean that that's not possible in the future. And so I have to kind of consider, well, how do I manage my mental health? So when I think back to the time when my well-being was low, it was years and years ago after uni, probably kind of struggling a bit with like, what direction am I going in? I was in a job that I was rubbish at. I really didn't enjoy it. It wasn't good, and things were beginning to kind of just become a bit meaningless, if you know what I mean. So I was like coming in at the last minute before the shift started. I was kind of like football and stuff that I was playing, I wasn't really enjoying it as much. I was kind of just like tired and lethargic the whole time. And I remember that, and I think back to that now, and I was like, I remember my manager or supervisor in that job at the time, she pulled me in one morning and she's like, is everything okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm like, oh, I'm just tired. And that was all it was. But now I look back and to think of that conversation, and actually she was checking in with me to see, like, how's your mental health? I never connected with that at the time. But I can look back now and think, to the outside eye, I was in a place where it could have looked like I was struggling, but I never put two and two together, and that was a lack of knowledge and understanding on my part. And I kind of got out of that. I was fortunate in that, I had good community, good set of pals. Like, I was very well settled in a great church, and all these things like impacted like a kind of supportive circle around me. But I was able to leave that job, and I went home for the summer, worked for my dad, played football with Casta and all that kind of stuff, and that was like kind of shifted me out of that space. But I often think, had I not kind of moved from that space, like, what was the direction of my mental well-being, and was it leading to a place that might have struggled and become a diagnosis? And I guess I'll never know, but this job has given me a newfound respect for understanding myself, my mental health, my mental well-being, and actually thinking, right, there is a degree of like, I have to manage this, and that's not the same for every individual. Like, circumstances can affect people differently, but sometimes we think of mental health as maybe just this thing that happens, and it's maybe poor mental health is just something that you're either just unfortunate enough to experience or it just happens to you. But actually, looking back with hindsight, I'm like, no, there was a bit of a journey that I was on, and I was able to change the trajectory of that, fortunately enough. But so yeah, I guess that's one of the lessons I would take, is that we've all got mental health, and there are things that we can do to manage it.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a lot of pet peeves, but one of them is when in tragic situations where someone's maybe like died by suicide or something like that, it's like people comment on Facebook and be like, "Oh, they had mental health," and referring to that they've had some kind of mental health issue, like maybe depression or something like that, because it conveys this idea that people who have like depression and anxiety, only they are the people that have mental health, when the reality is obviously we all have mental health, exactly what you're saying. But then also to differentiate the difference between mental health and mental well-being, like understanding that we have both, they're not the same, they're connected, but they're not exactly the same. And then understanding as well that our mental well-being can obviously feed into, as you're suggesting, potential problems with our mental health long term. So I think that that really rings true what you're saying for me as well. Like, I think back to when I was struggling with my own mental health, and there were a lot of things that I were doing, like lifestyle wise, or there were signs perhaps that things are not going in the right direction here, Chris, and maybe you should take an opportunity to address things. It's obviously difficult when you're struggling to do that, but yeah, you're quite right. There are things in like terms of lifestyle or just choices, I suppose, that can definitely contribute towards poor mental health or good mental health. That's not to obviously downplay the seriousness of someone who's struggling. Like I say, in that situation, it can be really difficult to make those positive steps. But there's definitely things that can be done to, as you say, change the trajectory.
No, absolutely, and I think it's important to point like not everybody's experience is going to be the same. So there may be experiences that people have that they don't really feel they have a sense of control over it as well. And it's not a case of just going for a walk and doing a few things that will just make you feel better. But in my experience, it was like, this is what I could have done, and this was what is affecting me. So yeah, it's kind of important that we recognise. But again, for me, it just comes back to the fact that I actually wasn't educated. I didn't have an understanding about it, and so as time's gone by and my understanding has developed, and by the way, it can continue to develop. You don't just reach a point where you feel that you know everything you need to know. Like, that's not how it works. But by continuing to kind of develop and grow in that sense, that can have a positive impact in the longer term for me. So yeah, but that's one lesson. There's other lessons in terms of what the work has kind of taught me. It's actually, I think, a big thing with mental health in terms of if you're wanting to support people or kind of be there for people. To use a kind of football analogy, it's like people say football, it's it's an easy game if you do the simple stuff well, type thing. There's that kind of idea that don't complicate it. And I think if you're looking to support people with mental health, like, do the basic things well, be there for them, listen to them, talk to them, ask them how they're doing, ask them, like, is there anything practically I can do to help? These are all fairly simple things, and that's all within our gift to do that. And that's what we should try and do the simple things well, care for people well, be there for them. And I guess the challenge with that is that sometimes we think if we do that, we fix people's situations. That's not necessarily something we can control. We can't fix someone's mental health just like that. But it's about doing the simple things well in terms of being there for people. That's the kind of other thing I've tried to take away from it, and not expecting myself to be responsible for how someone else is feeling as such.
Yeah, some really good points. I do think it is the case. Like, I'll be honest, I'm one of these people that automatically goes into fixer mode. So if somebody comes to me and says, like, I'm really struggling in this way and that way, or here's a situation that I don't know how to deal with, like, my approach is often automatically is like, oh, I want to fix things. So here's a solution. Here's what we're going to do. Here, this, that, have you tried this? But more often than not, that's not going to be helpful for that person. And as you say, just doing the simple stuff such as, right, well, what practical support can I give you? And putting it back, not putting it on them, but asking them, like, what do you need from me? And sometimes even less than that, like, just not even saying anything, just actually, like, giving them that space to listen and get it off their chest. Even ask the person straight up, like, do you want my advice here, or do you want me just to listen? And just giving them the option to ensure that you're supporting them and what they need in that moment. I think, yeah, that sort of stuff can be really, really helpful for supporting people with their mental health.
That's a really good point, actually, because I think it's kind of important that we recognise people aren't necessarily looking for us to fix them. You know what I mean? Sometimes they just want to be heard. Sometimes they just want to be listened to. And I think having someone say, this is what you need to do, it's not always the right thing for them. But actually framing it in that way you've just said, of like asking them, do you want some advice? Do you want just to be there and talk? Like that's being supportive. And that's anyone can do that, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. You've obviously worked with men closely for a number of years now. So, in that experience, what have been the most common issues that you've seen men struggle with?
The big one is like obviously diagnosis of depression or anxiety. If you want to like, have a kind of that's the kind of category you'd put it in. But I think to kind of delve into that, what are the things that guys struggle with? I think they often struggle things like identity, that kind of sense of what's my role, what's my expectation. Um, I think culturally we live in a place where men are expected still to be, maybe not still, but historically we've been expected to be the breadwinner, the provider, all that sort of stuff. And I think there's been a bit of a lasting impact on guys in terms of how they feel about themselves. Because if society says this is what you're meant to be, and they don't necessarily feel that that's what they're being, I think that can lead to questions internally that are maybe quite hard to deal with. And because we live maybe in a place where historically guys haven't been encouraged to open up and talk about what's on the inside, then that means when they're facing these issues and they don't talk about them, it just kind of builds up. And so I think that's partly some of the issues that guys have faced, questions of identity and purpose. And that's kind of stuff that we look at a bit within the course. Yeah, I think a lot of it just comes down to the kind of society we've grown up in, the expectations placed upon guys, and trying to be this kind of stoic character that's got everything. Even if guys aren't stoic and they're quite lively and like outgoing and stuff like that, there's maybe this expectation that we have to have everything together, and that's what we've got to present to people. And nobody's really got everything together perfectly, do they? So it's more important that we allow guys to kind of talk about these things in a way that they can then start to process them and deal with them. And what's good about the work that I've been involved in is when you bring guys together that are maybe struggling with these sort of same things, but in maybe slightly different ways, then that's when they really connect. And I think there's also a problem for men particularly about kind of meaningful relationships or friendships. So if that's something that's absent, like I think as beings we're designed to commune with other people. We're meant to be together. We're not meant to be on our own, isolated. And so if kind of meaningful friendships are only surface level, I think that maybe has a longer term impact, and it affects our ability to communicate well with people. And if we're not communicating well, then I think that's when we start to experience problems.
Yeah, I think the social side of it is just so important, and it's not just for men, as you say. For us as humans, it's something that we need, and the impact. Like there's studies to show that loneliness can reduce your life expectancy, like chronic loneliness, because that's just how big an impact that socializing and finding these good solid relationships. That's how much of an impact that can have on our health, not just our mental health, but our health more generally. And for me, again, that was another huge thing. Like when I was struggling with my mental health, like isolation became quite normal, and actually it was breaking out of that isolation and becoming more social and deepening relationships with people that really went a long way. I don't know if you've had any experience with that yourself. Any reflections on that difficult period in your life, and how the social side really kind of came to the fore, was a really important part of changing that trajectory as you talked about.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I've always been quite fortunate in that I feel I've had good people around me, and although in a lot of ways I'm quite a quiet and shy guy, I'm not the first guy to go up and speak to someone at all. I probably do. Siobhan tells me I'm extroverted in that I get my energy from being around other people. So I think that's always been quite an important thing for me, that if there's an opportunity to go out and see people and do something that are my mates, like I'll definitely try and do that. And so we know that in terms of like the 5 ways to better mental health, the first one that's often on the list is connecting, and like actually connecting with people. But you're right, because I think when people do struggle with their mental health, the tendency is just to, I don't want to kind of deal with people. You isolate yourselves, you push them away, and yeah, that's a temptation. And I think it's something we have to really push against when we're not feeling that sense of our desire to go out and speak with people. But it's tough going. It's not easy when you're in that place.
We're going to kind of come to a close shortly, but I've got a couple of other questions that I'd ask you. And this is more like practical advice for people that are listening. And the first question really is, what advice would you give to men who are finding themselves in that really tough place right now?
It's the simple one, and I guess people probably know the answer, but it's to talk. To reach out to someone, whether that's trusted friends or family or your GP, because a lot of people have not great relationships with their doctor or their GP, and we know there's issues around it can be difficult to get an appointment, but ultimately they are there to help, and while they might not have the answers, a GP, they can maybe signpost you to something that will help. So we would always encourage you to speak to someone, and that could be your GP, friends and family. But I suppose actually, as I talk and think about this, going back even before you speak to someone, I think one of the challenges that is actually to face up to what it is you're feeling and to address that and to not bury your head in the sand. Because I think we've got this kind of old mantra of like, keep calm and what is it? Keep calm and get on with it.
Keep calm and carry on.
Yeah. Carry on. Keep calm and get on. That's our kind of thing. And while that was helpful for the context that we were in when that phrase came about, to not address what you're feeling is quite a dangerous thing. And so, yeah, I think that's one of the first things you can do, actually be honest with yourself about how you're feeling and to say, you know what, I'm struggling. And a number of guys that I've spoken to over the years with regards to their mental health, one of the things they've said, like, speaking about your mental health is one of the hardest things you can do, but it's also one of the best things you can do. And so what that kind of tells me is that there's a fear connected to actually talking and speaking about it for the first time, and overcoming that fear can actually be more scary than the actual reality of speaking to someone for the first time. And the amount of people that said when they do speak to someone about their mental health, it's like a weight off their shoulder. That's really, really important that we're doing that. I think tied into that as well is the need to create spaces where you can have that conversation. I don't mean physical spaces, but actual create a culture where guys feel comfortable that they can speak. So that's why we know that the football and stadium environment works for mental health, because we're creating a space where they feel they can be open. And to do that, you need to be non-judgmental, you need to be willing to listen, and you need to be willing to try and understand what someone's going through. So, yeah, those are just a few things that come to mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice, and thanks for sharing all of that. I really liked how actually you started off with like talk, because that is often the normal, the sort of standard response, I guess, is like talk, and that's obviously great advice. But I liked how you kind of then reflected on it. It was like, well, actually, no. For a lot of guys, actually, it goes further than that. There's a step before that where we do have to recognize, things aren't the way they should be at the moment, and there's a problem here. I do think there is a lot of that stereotype that you mentioned, where we are seen as or meant or see ourselves almost as this strong, almost invincible type character who is immune to any kind of problem, and that's therefore the image we like to portray to people. But and it's hard then if you're in that mindset to accept, like, well, actually, no, I'm not this strong in inverted, what is that called again?
Quotations.
In quotations, yeah. I am not that strong man that I thought I was, but actually what you're doing and recognizing that you have problems, and actually there's things that you want to address, is you are showing a lot of strength, and then you're showing even more strength to speak to someone about it, because it is difficult, and fear does tend to hold a lot of people back from opening up. So that's some really excellent points on that. Just on the topic of talking, you also mentioned how the guys find that, or feel more supported, or find it perhaps easier to talk about when they have like a common issue or common ground or that sort of thing. And I think that's also very true. Like, I remember, again, in my own experience, like finding someone who got it, because at that stage you kind of felt like you were the only person, and I can really relate to that idea of just almost feeling free to talk about it because you knew the other person who was listening to you was going to understand because they've been there themselves or are going through exactly the same things that you're going through at the same time. So yeah,
Totally. And one of my colleagues, when he came into his role, we were talking about things, and he was quite open about mental health and his experiences. But he put it so well in that one of the reasons like the kind of change room works is that you're bringing people together with different experiences but similar emotions or similar feelings, and that's what helps them connect. And then when they hear other people's experiences, that kind of helps them look at things from a different perspective too. One of the easiest things to do for someone that's struggling with their mental health is to think, I'm the only one in this situation, and nobody is going through what I'm going through. And I guess that can be true at some level, but ultimately, it's really important that people know that you're not alone. There are plenty of people out there that are struggling with similar issues, that are going through similar things. And there's something quite empowering for the guys from like a change room perspective when they come into the project and they meet other guys that are going through similar things, that have kind of walked similar paths. It's again, it connects you to people, and that's so important for our mental health, is to feel connected, to kind of to be part of something.
yeah, I guess that can be a helpful point of view as well to think like in talking about the issues that I've got ongoing at the moment. Not only am I helping myself, but I'm actually helping other people to recognize exactly that they're not the only person who's struggling and struggling with those specific issues. So yeah, that's awesome. So just to wrap up the interview, I'm always finishing by asking the guests the same question, and it's been really interesting. I've had the same answer come up a few times, which is absolutely fine. But it does indicate, what strength actually looks like. So the question is, what one word would you use to describe a strong man and why?
Yeah, there's a number of words you could use. I think the one that I'll go with just now is like bravery, or being brave. Is that the one that people have been saying?
No, I think that's the first one. I think, well, we've had courage, which I suppose is kind of similar, but yeah, I think that might be a first.
So no, I was thinking about this and reflecting on like my work, and for any guy that comes into the changing room project, that takes a great deal of bravery. You have to be willing to put yourself out there, to kind of be a bit vulnerable. Vulnerable would be another word you could use, because that's actually a strength, to put yourself out of your comfort zone. But yeah, that idea of being brave. So the reason the project works, or has worked to date, is because there's been a bunch of brave guys across the country that have been willing to go into a room and speak about their mental health. And that, for some guys, that takes weeks to reach that point. But that's what makes it work. The project's only as good as the guys that take part. And thankfully, we've had a lot of great guys that have been involved. And to link in with the football term, we often think of bravery in a football match as like throwing yourself into a 50-50, like going for tackles where there's a risk of getting hurt. And that is brave, yeah, don't get me wrong. But people will often say as well, bravery on the football pitch is like being willing to take the ball in a difficult position, being willing to take the ball and make a mistake, trying something that's going to potentially create a chance, but there's a risk that goes with that. And I think that's relevant to this idea of strength, being brave when it comes to your mental health. Be brave, like take a risk, talk to someone, don't bury your head in the sand, address what it is that you're dealing with, take a chance and be positive. Being brave on the ball in football is about being positive and taking chances, and I think that applies in mental health and in life as well.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's a really, really good way to end the interview. I'm sure that will have left an impression on people who are listening. So yeah, thanks for that. And I've really, really enjoyed the conversation, specifically just how football and mental health have connected. You've helped me kind of see it in a way that, for someone who loves football and has played quite a lot of it, you're kind of helping to connect the two together in a way which I hadn't considered before, which is awesome and testament to why the changing room really is effective and helps a lot of people. So yeah, just to finish, well, firstly, like I say, thanks for coming on and sharing a wee bit, but I was just wondering if you could let people know if they wanted to know a little bit more about SAMH or the Change Room, or how to get involved with initiatives like that. How might they do that? Where would they go?
Yeah, I guess the easiest way is to go online, samh.org.uk. Within the website, there's heaps of stuff. It's a really good website with information about mental health, about how to support people, about how to deal with certain challenges and so on. But also within that, we've got a space for physical activity and sport, which is the department that my work comes under. And within that, you'll find information about the Change Room there. You can use a referral form that we've got on the website to kind of sign up, and you can see the different clubs that are connected with us that will hopefully be running the Change Room at different stages over the next year or so. So, yeah, samh.org.uk, have a look around there, and you'll no doubt find what it is you need.
Amazing. Pher, thanks very much for your time and for your insight. It's been really good, and yeah, take care.
Nice one, man. Thanks.
Now, you might be thinking, Pher, I've never heard of that name before. It's quite unique. Well, just to clarify, that is a nickname for Christopher, which was obviously quite helpful growing up, because, if someone shouts Chris, then I turn around and he turns around at the same time, complicated. So, yeah, a good way of differentiating the Christophers. Also, I'd like just to point out, that is the second Christopher we've had in a row. This is just a podcast full of Christophers. So if you are listening right now and your name is Christopher, then you're very welcome to come on the show. You don't have to have any expertise at all in terms of mental health or anything like that. Just the fact that you are Christopher means that you're top of the list. So yeah, get in touch. You can do so by emailing me at tsm@thewellbeingpt.com. Let me try that again. tsm@thewellbeingpt.com. We're going to move on now to the segment of the show that is designed to give your brain a break rather than break your brain. That's right, it's the brain break. And last week not last week, because it's been almost a month since this last type of episode. Last time I posed you the question, if you had to break a world record, what would it be? So I got a response from Colin, who suggested that he could attempt to memorise the record for memorising the most song lyrics. Now, I'm actually quite confident this would be a doable record for Colin, because, yeah, he's got one of these types of brains. He hears a song once and he basically knows all the words. It's quite something. Out of interest, I just went online to have a look to see if there's any kind of record that currently exists along those lines. And just in case you're interested, Mr. Himanshu Punjabi from India currently holds the record for the largest number of songs memorised and sung in live shows. And he's done over 200. So, on face value, 200 doesn't seem like that much, but actually when you think about it, let's say, let me get the calculator up here, right? So let's say average song length, 3 minutes, 200 songs, that's 600 minutes of songs, which is 10 hours worth of lyrics. So yeah, that's quite a lot. Also, that's my maths done on the spot. Please don't laugh if I've got that hilariously wrong. It is very possible, but yeah, that is actually a lot to try and memorise. But best of luck to you. I would love to see you smash that record. Having come across Mr. Punjabi's lyric record, I ended up going down a bit of a rabbit hole, and ended up on an article titled 60 of the weirdest Guinness World Records you probably don't know exist. Now, I'm not going to go through all 60, but I've whittled it down to the top 5 records, the top 5 most random records. So the first world record, and this isn't something I guess that was intentionally achieved, but it is the longest attack of hiccups. It doesn't take a lot of effort, really, because, it's out with your control. But Charles Osborne started hiccuping in 1922, and those hiccups, that attack of hiccups, only ended in 1990. I'm laughing, but that is not funny. That would be absolutely horrendous. 68 years of hiccups. Oh man, I can't imagine anything worse. Well, I can, but yeah, you know what I mean. That would have just been brutal. And for me, I get like these sharp pains across my chest when I start getting hiccups initially. The pains do subside, and don't worry, I'm not having a heart attack. I've had it checked, I'm all good. But yeah, I mean, even without pain, that would have been brutal for Mr. Charles. Obviously, these hiccups initially started in 1922, so I'm assuming Charles is no longer with us. But if he is, and if he's listening, can I just say, Charles, I really admire you for managing to put up with 68 years of hiccups. That would have been brutal, to say the least. Moving on to the next one, number 2, the fastest time to type using the nose. That's held by Davinder Singh. He typed 103 characters on a keyboard using only his nose, and he did that in 40 seconds. Now, I'm assuming that what he typed had to actually make sense, because I feel like if it didn't, all you would have to do is like smash your face off the keyboard a few times, like 10 seconds. Oh, look, I've typed 1,000 characters. Like, I don't know what would possess you to be like, you know what, today I'm just going to type something with my nose. And then eventually get to the point where like, I'm so good at this that I'm going to set a record. But, you know, each their own. Number 3, most apples held in the mouth and cut in half by a chainsaw in 1 minute. Wang Li chainsawed 25 apples from the mouth of Wang Xinli in 1 minute. Now, I've seen a few creative ways of cutting apples, you know, to try not to waste too much and get the most out of your apple. But this is a pretty novel way of slicing apples up. I'll definitely give that a try at some stage. Abby, can you get the chainsaw? Number 4, the furthest eyeball pop. I've seen a picture of this, and it really does haunt my nightmares. In 2007, Kim Goodman managed to pop her eyeballs to a protrusion of 12 millimeters, so that's almost half an inch, beyond her eye sockets. Which, yeah, as I say, lovely. I certainly wouldn't recommend Googling it, but yeah, it's quite something, I suppose. You know, it's not something you see every day, I guess, which is a good thing. It's a really good thing. And lastly, number 5. This one confused me a lot. Most consecutive pogo stick jumps with no feet. So firstly I thought, like, was this guy an amputee? Is that what he means by no feet? And then I googled him, and it looks like he's got feet. Now I recognise that could be prosthetics, but then technically you still have feet. So then I was like, right, he must have been doing it like upside down, using only his hands, like basically in a handstand whilst doing his pogo stick jumps. And then I stupidly thought, well, maybe it means like removing the pogo stick feet, but pogo sticks don't have feet, I don't think. So what I'm assuming is that he was pogo sticking upside down and completed a consecutive number of jumps, which again is ridiculous and very impressive. And similarly to the typing characters with your nose, I don't know how you get to the point where you're like, yeah, I'm going to just try and pogo stick upside down and make a record out of it, but each their own. And that was a guy called Fred, I'm going to butcher this as like I've butchered the other ones, Fred Grzybowski from America, who did 117 jumps, which is crazy. So big shout out to Fred Grzybowski for that one. So that was last episode's Brain Break topic. That means now it's time to set a topic for next week. Not next week. Next episode. I need to stop saying that. Next episode's Brain Break. And the context for this one is that last week myself and Abby went to look at a little puppy. A little Saluki Greyhound puppy. And it was beautiful, and it was so gentle and nice, and just such a nice dog. However, very sadly, we decided, and sensibly, as much as, you know, my heart was telling me to go for it, my head was be sensible and logical about things, which is a first. We decided it was not the right time to get the dog, so we said no in the meantime. At some stage, though, we will definitely be getting a dog, no doubt. But that has served as the inspiration for this week's Brain Break topic, which is, if you could have any animal as a pet, which animal would you choose and why? Now, don't worry about like this animal being aggressive or killing you or biting your paws or whatever. This animal, and it can be any animal, has been tamed to the point where it's no longer a risk to you or anyone. So you can pick whatever animal you like. So which animal would you pick and why? Please get in touch with your suggestions. I'll be putting a poll up on my Instagram in the coming days so you can get involved in the brain break. Alternatively, as I say, you can get in contact with the show by emailing me. Once again, that's tsm@thewellbeingpt.com. Just to finish off, we, as always, are going to give you a little bit of an update on the Strongmen group. This is a group that is based in Edinburgh at the moment, and it's a group that's focused on helping guys improve both their physical and mental strength, and something that's become very, very clear to me, and as we were reflecting on in the interview with Pher, is the importance of the social connections that we have with others. And this is where Thrive comes into play. So Thrive is our monthly online meetups. We jump on a video call and we very simply start things off by just having a bit of a chat. Everyone has an opportunity to just, talk through the everyday mundane things of life, but there's also space there if there's things that are on guys' minds or things that they want to get off their chest. There's opportunity to do that. Now, what's really stood out for me is, when I started the Strongmen and I started doing these Thrive sessions, it was very much, my thought process behind it was very much like, I'm going to lead and facilitate these conversations. If conversations are a bit slow, then I've got some self-help or self-development type presentations that I can run through to really help the guys out with their sort of mental fitness and their mental health. But do you know what? I have learned so much myself from listening to what these guys have had to say. Just building that connection and having that space to learn off each other and grow has been amazing, not just for the guys in the group but for me as well. And I really didn't expect that. Like I say, I thought it would be slightly distanced from the rest of the group in that regard and sort of the leader, I suppose. So we've got another Thrive event happening today, actually, the day of recording, which is Monday the 3rd of July. I'm really looking forward to that. Now, last Thrive I actually had a self-development presentation ready to go, but the way that the Thrive turned out, it was better that I just put that on the back burner because we had a guy in the group who was having a really tough time. So we utilised that full hour and a half, I think it was in the end, just to talk to him and to allow him to speak about what was going on. And in that moment, there was a realisation of, this is exactly what I wanted this group to be. This is exactly what I wanted it to do, to help guys talk about stuff that they perhaps wouldn't have an opportunity to talk about with anyone else. So that was a really, really nice moment, and I'm really seeing the benefit, not just personally in having these Thrive sessions, but I'm seeing it reflected in the guys in the group as well, which is really amazing. Now, as I mentioned at the start of the show, I am taking a little bit of a break from the podcast, and I will also be taking a short break with the group stuff over the summer. And the reason for that is not just because I'm busy, but I also want to take stock of the group at the moment, to consider feedback from the members and maybe adapt and change things a little bit so that I can support guys even more with their health and fitness. But if you want to keep up with the latest on the Strongmen group, then you need to make sure to follow me on social media. I'm at the Wellbeing PT, and obviously follow the podcast, listen to the upcoming episodes. You'll be kept in the loop about what's happening. And if you've got any questions, or if you'd like to get involved now or in the future, then do just get in touch with me. I don't bite often, and I'm more than happy to help you with any queries or questions you might have. Lastly, if you'd like to support the podcast, the best thing you can do for me right now is to leave me a review. So wherever you're getting this podcast, whether it's Spotify, Apple Music, or something else, just take your phone out, jump on the app and leave me a review. It goes such a long way to helping the podcast get a little bit of visibility. If you'd like to go further and support the work of this podcast, then you can actually donate as well. You'll find a link in the episode description. There's no pressure on my part to do so, but if you do feel so inclined to give a little bit and support the work to help guys improve, then feel free to do so. Thanks so much for your ongoing support. I've received a lot of kind words from people over the months, and as these episodes are coming out, I'm getting a lot of good feedback as well. I'm going to tie things up there for this week, but keep your eyes peeled for more episodes coming over the next couple of weeks. But until then, take good care of yourself.